door. And if you need the restroom, there's some restrooms outside surrounding the building. So how many of you here are just here for the first time at Sun and Fun? How many have been here many times for Sun and Fun? And how many years?
27.
27. Wow. And where are you from?
Right here.
Right here. Okay, good. That's good. Welcome. I'm Vicki Lynn Sherman, your host at the FAA Aviation Safety Center on the Sun and Fun Complex at Lakeland, Florida, coming to you live from the 2015 Sun and Fun Fly-In. For over 17 years, we have been bringing the aviation message, safety message to you via seminars, workshops, and videos using our aviation safety team representatives, which means our production crew is made up almost entirely of volunteers, giving their time to support aviation safety. After today's presentation, please take a few minutes to thank our floor crew, camera crew, and our stage crew for their time and efforts. At this time, I'd like to introduce our next presenter. We have Rick Lovell, who will be speaking on pilot deviation expectations bias. Before becoming an air traffic controller in 1989, Rick served in the U.S. Air Force as a flight simulator operator and technician, training pilots on emergency procedures. During his FAA career, he has been a controller, a supervisor, and is currently a support specialist in charge of quality control at Daytona Beach Approach. Interacting with the flying community is one of the things he enjoys the most about his job. He believes that it is a great way of finding out what controllers can do better, as well as providing information to pilots so they can be more safety and more effectively operate within the air traffic control system. Let's give a round of applause for Rick Lovell.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. First off, thanks for skipping breakfast or having an early breakfast to come for this on a Sunday morning. I do appreciate you guys being here. Before I get started, one thing I have to say is, this is a quote, "The playbacks used for this presentation do not represent the official investigation or report." And the reason for that is at least one of these is still under investigation. It just happened recently this year. The other thing I want to make note of too is these items I'm presenting to you, we're not looking to blame anybody, even though people do make mistakes in these. What we're looking for is what caused them to make those mistakes, what caused them to make those decisions. We're looking for the causal factors and this thing called expectation bias in them. As I was telling a couple of people got here real early, there are a lot of catchphrases out there in the business world, synergy, being proactive, etc. And expectation bias could be one of those terms too. However, over the last few years, I've done a lot of investigations into control errors and pilot deviations as part of my job, as well as some accident investigations, unfortunately. And as I'm going through this and seeing things, it's like, yep, well, there's pilot error there, that's human error, and then you start looking a little deeper and it's like, well, what caused the human error? And this term expectation bias, I came across it a couple of years ago, and there's a lot of articles out there now on it. And expectation bias, I really don't have a great definition for it. I'm sure there is one, but a good way for me to explain it is if the grocery store is 2 miles away, and the road that you go to work is basically on the same route, but you take an exit, to the highway, or you take another road halfway between you and the store to go to work. So you're on your way to the grocery store, grab a couple things real quick, and before you know it, you're a mile down the interstate or a mile down that road that takes you to work, and you're going, why the heck am I not doing this? Okay, that's expectation bias. You're on your way to the groceries, and you find yourself on your way to work. So that's a real basic example of it. Other examples are when you hear what you expect to hear. So if you have a normal taxi route you have out from where you park out to the runway, let's say it's via Alpha November Charlie, and the controller says taxi via Alpha Mike Charlie one day, and you say, read back, Roger, Alpha Mike Charlie, and you heard it, you read it back, and then you get out there and you get to the Alpha November intersection, you hang that left or right on November, and they're like, whoa, 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 stop, because it's closed further down or something like that. And you're thinking, well, how did I do that? It's the exact same thing. You're used to a routine. All right, so one of the causal factors of this is our training. Controllers, pilots alike, and in many, many jobs, we train procedure. And from your very first flight lesson with a checklist to the mental checklist of working in the pattern, basic Cessna, mixture, carb heat, flaps, power, you're going through this, seat belt, doors, all those things. You get into this procedural thing. And when you're trained for procedures, when that non-routine thing pops up, that's when you have the opportunity to make a mistake. So our training lends itself to us making mistakes. Now, one of the things you also see happen in a lot of accident investigations, unfortunately, is when the information that the instrumentation is providing the pilot conflicts with what they expect to be true. If any of you guys watch any of the accident recreation TV shows, there's a couple of them there where the pilots are looking at their gauges and the airplane says that it's descending and they've got positive pitch and they've got full power, and the pilot's sitting there going, I can't figure out why we're still going down. But there's something else going on, and they're looking at it like, that doesn't make sense, it's not right. So there's times where the information that we see conflicts with what we expect to be true or what we think should be happening. That's expectation bias in the worst case, because you don't trust your instruments. How many of you guys have actually experienced spatial disorientation? And I'm talking scary spatial disorientation. Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. You're sitting there, and I remember the first time it happened to me, I was in a OA 37. It's a T-37 with bigger engines in it. I was over in Korea, riding right seat, and the guys will let me fly. 800 overcast, we get to 400 feet, wheels in the well. I got the aircraft, hit the deck 800 feet, and it was just complete whiteout on the screen. My head spun, and I couldn't tell what was up, down, left, right, just like that. And I locked on those instruments, and the instruments would tell me that, I was climbing at 2,000 feet per minute, and everything was solid and fine, and my body felt like it was in a snap roll. And I just focused on that. That's, one of those things where your body's telling you one thing, the instruments are telling you another, and it's like, that can't be right. I've got to be in a turn. That's expectation bias as well. Okay, so when we're busy or we let our minds become occupied with other thoughts, our brains perform shortcuts so that we can multitask. Now, I had a friend of mine tell me a few months ago, nobody really multitasks. There's no such thing as multitasking. And I disagreed with him initially, and then I started thinking, they're right. Nobody can do more than one thing at once. You can't do more than one job at a time. You can, however, act like a computer, where you time share. You're scanned in your cockpit. You think you're multitasking, but you're really not. You're actually looking at one thing, looking at this, and then you're listening to the radio, and you're going back and forth in very short bursts of time. So when you're multitasking or time sharing like that, your brain tends to take the routine items and just kind of let them flow by. For example, that taxiing example again. those visual cues going out to the runway that you're used to. Your mind says, okay, everything's fine. This is normal, normal, normal. And you're focusing on something else. You might be looking at your checklist. You might be talking to your passengers. Someone's having a problem with their seatbelt or something like that they didn't take care of before you left the ramp. Those are the distractions that cause you to miss things. And again, it's expectation bias. Is it a distraction? Yes. But the base reason is an expectation bias because you're not expecting anything to go wrong. So half listening to the radio is something that I've found a lot of people do. You get your taxi instructions, you get your approach clearance, you get your clearance from clearance delivery, you get instructions from the radar controller to join an airway, and it's all routine. It's, for example, an approach clearance. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you're 4 miles on the mark. Return left heading 090, maintain 1,600 until established on the localizer, cleared ILS runway 7 approach. Bang, 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 bang. It's the same thing every time. But if there's a change in there in the middle, that's likely where you're going to miss. Because you start hearing the beginning of the message, you're like, oh yeah, I know this message. I know what's coming next. So you stop listening. You might be changing a heading bug or something else. You're doing something else in the cockpit. And then at the end of the message, you hear, oh, end of the message, my turn to talk. And you repeat the message back. And you may repeat the message back correctly or incorrectly, depending on how well your brain hears things in the background. Well, let's assume that you repeat something back incorrectly. There was a change there. Okay, they told you to maintain 2,000 until established on the localizer because he had traffic crossing underneath, something like that, and he knew by the time you got to the localizer, the traffic would be gone. So that extra few hundred feet was going to give him separation. You read back, maintain 1,600, and now the controller is half listening. Okay, because he's expecting you to read back 2,000 because you're a professional pilot. Okay, and he doesn't hear you say 1,600 and misses the read back. These are called hear-back, read-back errors, and it's one of the major issues in aviation, not just from the air traffic side, but from the pilot side as well. Perfect example we had just a couple weeks ago at Daytona. Pilot was cleared initial altitude of maintain 3,000. Gets out to the runway less than 5 minutes later. The controller, working local control, has been given a restriction from the radar room to call for release any IFR aircraft. So he calls for release, and they give 2,000 as the release altitude instead of the standard 3. The tower controller says, in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, flight runway heading, maintain 2,000 on departure, clear for takeoff. Pilot reads back, roger, maintain 2,000 on departure, clear for takeoff. Gets off the departure end, they switch him to radar, and he climbs right to 3,000 feet. Now, fortunately, the traffic had just passed him. I mean, by 30 seconds. 30 seconds earlier, they would have been right into each other. The pilot probably had 3,000 written on his knee board. He might have had 3,000 on his bug. He read it back correctly, but he made the error. It's a pilot deviation. What caused it? Human error. What caused the human error? Expectation bias. He had the 3 in his head. Everything else went out the window. Okay, so middle part of the message, start listening. You can tell I've done this briefing lots of times because I'm still using notes. So what we need to do as pilots and controllers is we need to listen more actively, but we need to listen for the mistake. And this is something that I tell my newer controllers that are going through training at Daytona, is that you have to always assume that the other guy is going to read something back wrong. And that's taxing. I mean, that's extra work. You know, you're making your brain work extra. But that's something that you guys can do as pilots when you're working with the air traffic system, is listen for the mistake. And not necessarily on transmissions to you, but transmissions to everybody else. I'll give you an example here. You're cleared for takeoff, runway 1, and your focus immediately goes into the cockpit. Okay, we're clear for takeoff. You do the right thing. You look left and right down the runway, make sure nothing else is coming and going. You pull out, and you start your roll. In that 15 to 20 seconds or 30 seconds it takes all that to happen, a transmission comes across, number 456, clear for takeoff, runway 9. Runway 9 is going to cross runway 1 at some point. Is it critical to you? Total awareness, listen for everything. One of the other things that I talk to the new CFI hires that come into Daytona, because we have 5 major flight schools at Daytona Beach. We have over 150 training aircraft that fly out there every day. We do 700 to 800 arrivals and departures at Daytona every day. Our average traffic count on a daily basis is somewhere around 2,300. We are in the top 30 busiest facilities in the country. You wouldn't think it because we only have a dozen commercial flights a day, but everything flying over us brings our count up too. Sterile cockpit. Anybody here want to give me the generally recognized definition of a sterile cockpit? When a sterile cockpit happens? Go ahead.
No talking about anything except what you're doing at that time until you get through 10,000 feet.
Right, and that usually starts at the end of the runway. So from the time that you're cleared onto the runway through 10,000 feet or 10,000 feet until you're clear of the runway, nothing goes on in the cockpit except for what is critical to that phase of flight. I think we should expand that. Sterile cockpit.
FAA requirement, is it?
No, this is a good practice, a best practice, and it's something that airlines demand of their flight crews. It's company policies. These are not regulations. But if you think about where accidents happen, they tend to happen on the ground. There are more collisions and more accidents on the ground than there are airborne, because people run into each other, or they run off of taxiways or runways or whatever. There's more things that happen on the ground. What we have found with runway incursions, where people accidentally cross a runway, or what we call movement area incursions, where people leave the ramp and get onto a taxiway or something like that, movement area issues, is that they are focused on something else. They're distracted. And the causal for that is lots of times while I was going over my flight plan, I was double checking my frequencies, I was talking to my student. Sterile cockpit should start from the time that you get your taxi clearance. Personally, I believe once that engine started and you're contacting ground, it should be sterile cockpit. Anytime you're talking ATC, especially anytime that airplane's moving. If the airplane's moving, whether it's on the ground or in the air, you should be focused on flying the aircraft. The fact that you're not airborne doesn't really make a lot of difference to me, because that's where the things are happening, is when the airplane's moving and you're focused on something else. Your focus should be on the operation of the aircraft. So if you do sterile cockpit the entire time we're moving, we're good. You get out to your runway, you stop, okay, you start talking again. If you miss a transmission, chances are no one's going to get hurt. You're not moving. So listen for the mistakes and expect the other guy to make a mistake. Sterile cockpit. I touched on this a minute ago. Listen to other transmissions that could affect you. Another aircraft being cleared for takeoff, somebody else being cleared to land. On some smaller airports or even bigger airports when things are slow, one control will be working ground control and the tower or local control frequency combined up, and you may hear someone get runway crossing on your frequency to cross your runway. And you're like, and so listening for those things, you might catch something else. Don't be afraid to speak up. You might be holding short and you see an aircraft start to cross at the next intersection if you're doing intersection departures, or you might see an aircraft on short final and they clear someone for takeoff. Don't be afraid to key up and just say, whoa, 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 or stop, 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 or anything. Get everyone's attention, because trust me, everyone will stop when they hear an unusual transmission. There's a great video out there of a 747. This happened sometime last year. 747 crossing a runway right in front of another 74 in short final. There's no way that should have happened. Even if the pilots had been cleared to cross that runway by the controller, what's the first thing our parents teach us when we're learning how to cross the street? You look both ways. And here's two guys in the 7-4 crossing a runway, which, like a gun, you should always expect is loaded. Okay? Didn't look. If they had looked right out the window, they would have saw that 7-4 was inside of a mile funnel. But they still went right across. The other 7-4 went around. It's an amazing video. Okay, I'm going to start with the playbacks. Again, don't want to look for what the person did wrong, or we don't want to lay blame here. We're looking at these as examples. This first one is, I don't know if it's been closed out by FAASTeam yet or not. It happened earlier this year at Daytona. When I did the telecon on this one with the people up in headquarters, because this was a high visibility event, they were amazed because what happens in this one is an aircraft departs without a clearance, overflies an aircraft that departed in front of it. The amazing part is also an aircraft going in position midfield that he also overflew. So you have one aircraft overflying two aircraft. It's important to note that the controller, and I'm taking this from my first briefing I gave last Wednesday, the controller says Roger to all the pilots that call ready. Roger is an acknowledgement of a transmission. It is not a control instruction. It's a shortcut that controllers use at busier airports, because if I tell you, I'll do a phraseology example here. Daytona Tower, 1, 2, 3, 4 at November 5, ready for departure. Number 1, 2, 3, 4, Roger. I've acknowledged your transmission. I haven't given you any further instructions or authorizations. If I take the time to say in 1, 2, 3, 4, Roger, hold short, runway 7 left at November 5, because I have to state the number of the runway and I have to state the intersection, I am now required to get a full and complete readback from you. Number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Roger, hold short, runway 7 left at November 5. Daytona Tower, Roger, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, holding short, 7 left at November 5. That took an extra 10 or 12 seconds to accomplish all that, if you got it right and I got it right on the first set of transmissions. If the readback isn't correct, if I just hear, Roger, holding short at November 5, no good, got to go back, I need the call sign. So I potentially could spend another 30 or 40 seconds getting your readback. Now, at an airport that does 700 departures a day, or 350, 400 departures a day, plus the same number of arrivals, because at our airport, they all go away and they all come right back. They're out there for an hour, 20 miles away, and they come right back. Those 20 or 30 seconds could allow me to coordinate a runway crossing, to get another aircraft airborne, to do a number of things that a controller has to do. Whereas Roger, done. An individual in the other meeting brought up to, well, shouldn't air traffic tell you to hold short? I shouldn't have to tell you to hold short. When you taxi out to a runway, do you just pull it on the runway without talking to anybody? Even in an uncontrolled airport, you're going to make transmissions, on common traffic advisory frequency, you're taking the runway, that kind of stuff. Could it prevent this issue? Yes, it could. It certainly could. But to make that a requirement would slow the system down even further. And over the last 15 years, enough changes where you can't go into a position at night from an intersection. You can't put multiple aircraft on the runway and line up and wait and then shotgun them from the midfield intersection back to the approach end. All those things are gone now. Why? Because we've had too many mistakes with them. We've had too many problems, and there were definitely safety issues. Okay, so I want you to think about these things as we watch this. I will stop it as we go along to point out some things. I am open to any comments. Okay, this is a discussion, and all viewpoints are welcome.
Daytona Tower 408 on forward runway, for November 5, 7 left, ready for departure. 408 Daytona Tower, Roger. We're at 481, turn left heading 030, contact departure. Heading 030, 481.
Riddle is the call sign for Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University.
Number 2128, take off, 71 Papa 5. Number 21228 Daytona Tower, Roger.
1, 2, 1, 2, 2, 8, Daytona Tower, Roger. 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, 8, Daytona Tower, Roger. 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, 8, Daytona Tower, Roger. 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, 8, Daytona Tower, Roger. 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, 8, Daytona Tower, Roger. 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, 8, Daytona Tower, Roger. 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, 8, Daytona Tower, Roger. 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, 8, Daytona Tower, Roger. 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, 8, Daytona Tower, Roger. 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, 8, Daytona Tower, Roger. 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, 8, Daytona Tower, Roger. 1, 2, 1,
Daytona Tower, good afternoon. Citation 71 Foxtrot Bravo is holding short at the end, ready for release 7. November 71 Foxtrot Bravo, Daytona Tower, roger. Daytona Tower 905 at November 5 for runway 4 left, ready for takeoff. Roll 905 Daytona Tower, roger. Roll 408, runway 7 left, November 5, clear for takeoff, fly runway heading. Roll 408, clear for takeoff, runway heading, 71 Foxtrot.
Now, the controller did not hear that end of that transmission. And the reason is he had something else that he was about to do. He's getting ready to coordinate with the ground controller, which he's actually doing just about now, to cross runway 7 left at taxiway Echo with a couple other Riddle aircraft that
Number
are heading for
2122,
the
runway
short
7
runway.
left, Papa 5, line up by way traffic will be crossing downfield.
Right about now, the ground controller
030, kind of departure.
is telling his guy to cross, and then he turns and says, "Hey, what's with the citation?" This is supposed to be a Seminole, not a King Air.
410 Daytona Tower, hold short 7 left.
The tower controller looks and sees that. The timing's off a little bit on the
And
playback.
November 71 Foxtrot Bravo, climb and maintain 2000 immediately. We've got the traffic inside up to 2000, 71 Foxtrot. November 1 Foxtrot Bravo, you were not cleared for takeoff. Copy that, 71 Foxtrot. Number 408, turn left heading 030 immediately. 408, 030 immediately, got the traffic over. November 71 Foxtrot Bravo, possible pilot deviation, advise when you're ready to copy a phone number.
Okay. So, where does expectation bias come in here? On this playback here, these aircraft are actually side by side in this taxiway. The playback doesn't really show what really happens at Daytona. We can stack 4 aircraft side by side at November 4 and November 5 because our landing light aircraft will clear at November 2 and 3. So as somebody's clearing here, we'll be launching from down here, downfield. But you have an aircraft that's number 1 at the end. He's ready to go. He doesn't see anybody else in front of him. Now, granted, these guys to the intersection after he did, so he didn't see them downfield. And this is it's just over a mile away from the approach end. So it's difficult to see small aircraft at an intersection a mile away with the slant range and the angle that you're looking at it. So he's number 1, he's at the end of the runway, and he hears a takeoff clearance. Now, most of us agree that Riddle 408 sounds nothing like November 71 Foxtrot Bravo. Expectation bias takes over here, though, because you're number 1, you hear a takeoff clearance, and you act on it. It's human nature. But it's also expectation bias. During the post-event interviews, I talked to the citation pilot, and he said, well, I heard the takeoff clearance, and I thought it was for me. I asked him, did you happen to see anybody pulling out onto the runway in front of you? He goes, no. Now, this goes back to what I was talking about earlier. He's clear for takeoff runway 7 left, as far as he's concerned, even though it was for Riddle 408. And then 20 seconds later, there's information for 21228, runway 7 left at Papa 5, line up and wait. That's the thing I was talking about earlier. Other transmissions that may affect you. Okay? Is it comforting for me to say, hey, listen, air traffic's going to mess up. You need to be, even though you've got clearance for the runway, you need to be out there listening and watching down the runway? No, it isn't. But even back in my simulator days, we used to train pilots for aircraft that would pull out unexpectedly. And in the visual simulators that we had, the full motion ones, we would have aircraft sitting at an intersection or even at the full length. And when the guy's on a half-mile final, we would command that aircraft to pull it on the runway to see if they noticed it. Because this type of problem has been going on for decades. This is nothing new. So even though you have a clearance for a runway, you need to maintain awareness, because even if the controller didn't issue 21228 to land up and wait, I've had instances at Daytona where an aircraft is taxiing out, makes the turn for their intersection departure, and then just proceeds right onto the runway. I've got a playback here, which I won't be able to get to, but a Cessna pulls out at November 5, gets out to the middle of the runway, goes, oh, dang, and turns around and goes right back in with the King Air rolling from down here at Puppet 2. So even if ATC didn't mess up, somebody else can mess up. So you need to keep your eyes open and your ears if you can too. Again, I know the cockpit is busy on any aircraft during the departure phase, which is why we like to have the sterile cockpit idea. So Fox Bravo did not see the guy pulling out. The guy pulling out did not see Fox Bravo until he was starting to turn to join the center line. And he said, yeah, my peripheral caught something. I looked, and he was rotating and becoming airborne right about here, which is about 1,200 feet away. And he said he cleared him by 50 to 100 feet. Again, I think it's a good example of expectation bias. Fortunately, nobody got hurt. Just so you know, this pilot did not lose his ticket. Saw him fly day before yesterday. Okay. I'll talk a little bit about how FAASTeam handles pilot deviations in the end, but they're still out there. Okay. This next one is audio only, and it's eerily similar. This one, however, deals with a Delta flight in Riddle 701. Same type of setup. Riddle 701 is midfield. The Delta aircraft is full length. They are the only two airplanes on the airport. It's early morning. And again, the Delta typically got out there first, and he can't see the little guy sitting there a mile or so away. Come right up here to the first call.
110, runway 7 left, November 4, cleared for takeoff.
Good right, 110, clear for
Go back a
takeoff.
little bit. There we go.
Daytona Tower, Little 701, November 4, ready for takeoff.
701 Daytona Tower, turn right, heading 110, runway 7 left, November 4, cleared for takeoff.
Good right, 110, clear for takeoff, 7 left, southbound, November 4.
Okay, so you heard that other transmission. The other transmission was coming over on the secondary tower frequency. Daytona has 2 tower frequencies. We use both of them every day. The secondary tower frequency was published airport directory as our primary tower frequency. I don't know for how many years it's been like that, but as a result of this incident, I went in, made the phone call, and got it changed. Delta was on the secondary tower frequency, which the controller had in their speaker, not in their ear. When they cleared Riddle 701 for takeoff, Delta's readback was not a full readback. It's not required. But their readback was 110, good to go. Or Delta 110, good to go. Something that's very short, and you could hear barely in the background on the speaker there. The controller's mistake was that they did not key up and say aircraft transmitting on 118.1, say again. They just disregarded it. Expectation bias here is the controller didn't think it was an important transmission. There's nothing else going on. The controller does not expect Delta to be on that frequency. Controller does not expect Delta to roll without a takeoff clearance because she hasn't talked to Delta yet. She's only talked to the one aircraft as far as she was concerned. Again, these are human errors, but they're based on human expectations. All right, so for the next minute and a half, there's not a whole lot that goes on. So skip to 6:55.
Delta 1087, fly heading 070.
070 for Delta 1087 now.
Delta 1087, I never cleared you for takeoff. I'm not understanding what you're doing.
Delta 1087, maybe say 110 heading after takeoff to clear us to go.
Negative, I cleared at Rhode 701.
Okay, so, excuse me. There's a high probability here that this Delta crew had never been to Daytona before or had limited experience at Daytona. Because at Daytona, all of our turbojets, turboprops, all our high performance goes straight out. And that's true for most airports. Most airports, unless you're on a departure procedure, you get runway heading to an initial altitude. This Delta flight managed to get wheels in the well and make their turn just prior to the departure in a runway and put themselves GPS aligned with Rhode 701 chasing them down. Why the TCAS didn't go off and alert these guys to the aircraft at 12 o'clock and just over a mile, like 1.1 miles, that was 100 knots slower than them, I still don't know why. But you heard Delta say, Roger 070 now with kind of like a question mark in there, you know, because they've just been given the 110. They had just got to the 110, and now the controllers tell them to turn back to 070. Delta climbed out, went on his way, never knew that there was a arrow 12 o'clock in a mile that he was overtaken by over 100 knots. He probably would have climbed over him, but again, that's just too close. So expectation bias again here. Controller not expecting Delta to call. Delta's number one at the end. Expect the takeoff clearances for him. They're probably going through checklists, talking in the cockpit, normal sterile cockpit procedures. They heard a transmission, but they only heard part of the transmission, and they made, I hate to use the word assumption, but they expected that that was for them because there's nobody else out there. You know, Sunday morning, 7:30. Who else could it be for? We're the only ones down here. Okay. Yes, sir. And got a microphone coming.
I'm not sure I understood the situation. The Delta took off at 9 o'clock.
On December 6, 1999, at about 8.
And what transmission did he make when he said 070 is clear to go?
And on his initial readback, and it's really hard to hear on this, but having listened to the tapes firsthand, his readback was something like Delta 442, 110, good to go. Was their readback from the takeoff clearance?
But did he assume that he was cleared for takeoff and
Yes,
said good to go? That means
Well, no,
cleared for
the
takeoff.
controller said Rhode 701 after departure flight heading 110 at 5, clear for takeoff. So the controller gave a very full departure set of instructions to Rhode 701. Delta heard cleared for takeoff,
Okay.
and because they're the only one at the lane, any other aircraft, they're, oh, that's us. And they're probably sitting in the car. Again, I'm making assumptions here. 110, 110. Okay, we're good. Yeah. Okay. Click, click, click. You know, they've already got the passengers seated, flight attendants are down, and off they go. As soon as he gets the departure in, wheels in the well, I mean, literally, it was like thump, thump. The guys roll into a 110 heading and just hunting down Rhode 701. As soon as the controller sees the aircraft start to turn, she just very comes to Delta 2442, turn left now, heading 070. And he's like, 070 now. And we're just getting to 110. Yes, sir. Another question over here.
Okay, you're saying how Delta responded that cleared to go on the secondary departure frequency.
Correct.
So if he was tuned to that, how did he hear the clearance on the primary departure frequency?
Because the controller is transmitting on both frequencies at the same time.
Okay.
So, and in fact, lots of times controllers, the facilities is slower, like early in the morning. Like Daytona has 6 radar scopes, and we will staff all 6 of those every day. But at 6 o'clock in the morning, I'm using 1 radar scope because I've got 5 aircraft in the airspace, and 1 controller can handle those 5 aircraft. They are transmitting on 8 frequencies. So you can be on a frequency, and that's why many of you might hear, change to my frequency 118.6, because that's not their primary frequency. They're combined up on one position, and they're working multiple sectors of airspace. So that's how that happens, okay? Any other questions about this one? Because I've got one more. And this one here, boy, it's a doozy too. This is an older one, but it's a goodie.
8:35 p.m., United Airlines Flight 1448, a Boeing 757, was involved in a runway incursion on runway 5 right at Theodore Francis Green State Airport near Providence, Rhode Island. At the time of the incident, it was dark and the reported visibility was 1/4 mile. After United 1448 landed on runway 5 right, the tower controller instructed the flight crew to proceed to the terminal using taxiways November and Tango and report crossing runway 16. While taxiing in the fog, the flight crew became disoriented and turned onto taxiway Bravo by mistake. They then provided incorrect position reports to the tower controller. The airplane ended up at the intersection of runway 16 and runway 23 left. Note that runways 23 left and 5 right are opposite ends of the same runway. Shortly afterward, a Federal Express aircraft taking off on runway 5 right passed very close to United 1448. The subsequent conversation between the tower controller and United 1448 shows continued uncertainty about the aircraft's position.
Real quick, on this one, you're going to hear multiple transmissions where in the same sentence, the pilot and or the controller will say, we're holding short of 25 right. I can see the sign here for a runway, taxiway Kilo and 23 left. And they'll say left and right in the same sentence. And nobody stops. They just keep going. Like you said, there's confusion, there's communication issues here. There's disorientation. And the other thing that's important to remember too is that it's nighttime, it's foggy. Okay, and some of these people are still acting like this is normal operations, great VFR weather. Your mindset has to change when either one, you're at an unfamiliar airport, or two, you're in other than good VFR conditions. And that's not to say that a lot of these incidents don't happen in good VFR conditions, but humans as a nature don't like to stop and ask for directions, women included. Okay, I know men have a bad reputation for that. Someone just got bumped. People don't like to admit when they're wrong. People don't like to admit when they're not sure what to do, and they'll just press on. And a little bit of ego involved there. Don't be afraid to stop and say, don't know where we are, need progressive taxi instructions, whatever. It could save you, literally, okay? Not just from an error, but from actually getting hurt. And now that moved.
For example, there will be several references to runway 23 right, while the airplane is actually on 23 left.
Flight 1448, what's your position? And we're clear of the runway on 1448. Thank you, taxi to ramp, the taxi is November and Tango, report crossing runway 16. Okay,
November Tango, report crossing 16.
Wind 1405.
This is an arriving aircraft.
January 2998 is home short. UPS 27 taxi.
UPS 27 ground leaving runway 5 right, taxi Victor, and runway 23 right, hold short runway 16.
Okay, so you can already see it going bad. Taxi instructions were November and Tango to the ramp. This aircraft just turned on the taxiway Bravo. Now, we don't know if they didn't see the signs or if there was some kind of confusion. But for some reason they turned onto Bravo, and they're going to continue. Bravo, I mean, it's real, the two taxiway instructions, so it seems pretty simple, but.
Okay, we can't take Victor this time. We're based on runway. Chance to go at Alpha Mike in November.
If you have 27, you can accept that taxi, hold the position for now, please, so clear out all taxi.
Okay, we'll hold a position here on the ramp over UPS 27.
If you're 1020, turn off taxi November or Alpha and report clear on the runway, please.
Right, it looks like we've got November here. He is at 1020.
If you're 1020, thank you, taxi to ramp. Via taxi is November and Tango, report crossing runway 16.
November Tango to the ramp report crossing 16, and we are clear of 5 at this time. You are 1020.
If you're 1020, thank you.
Those USCF says they're clear of the runway.
62, runway 5 right, fly runway heading, clear for takeoff.
Runway heading, clear for takeoff, 5 right, 1662. Now 1448 is on November by the runway here. You don't see the third crop stay here on November.
Now 1448, someone crossway 16, turn taxiway November Tango on the other side.
Let's all on the other side, United, 1448.
Okay, so 1448 just got a bad position report. They said they're on November near Tango, and she tells them to cross runway 16. So he thinks he's November Tango and has been given permission to cross runway 16. So he may see the 16 signs, and now he's going to cross.
Houston 20, it says caution, 757 ahead, just coming up on runway 16 in November, taxi ramp.
Okay, we're looking for the other.
So she's telling this guy to watch out for this guy ahead because she knows there's limited visibility.
Houston 1020, negative, that was just if you missed November on the rollout. Taxi ramp, via taxi November and Tango. Report entering taxiway Tango, please.
Thank you, November Tango, USA 1020.
Listen to the audio in the background.
And United 1448, we're approaching Kilo here. Somebody just took off.
Yeah, at 1448, you shouldn't be anywhere near Kilo. Hold your position, please. Just stop. This is United 1448. We are currently on our runway. I hope you're not to the right with the Kilo. And I need to go on to the Kilo taxiway. At 1448, you're supposed to taxi November at Tango. I need to know what runway you're on. I can't see anything from the tower.
Ma'am, we are on 23 right intersection of 16, and we did not connect on November. We are by Kilo to our right, and we just overshot Kilo. We did not see it.
At 1662, contact departure.
1662, what departure is wrong? Runway on 23 left here.
United, stand by, please. You're at 2998, runway 5 right, fly runway heading clear for takeoff.
Ma'am, I'm trying to advise you we're on an active runway, United 1448.
TP right is not an active runway, it's a taxiway when we're ISR in the dark.
Yes, we're staying clear of all runways until we figure this out.
Everybody stand by, please. Radio silence until I talk to you. Anyway, everybody stand by. US Air, 1020, hold your position, please. I don't know exactly where the United is. I'll figure it out in a minute.
We're on Tango, 1020. Please, United 1448, we're on 2 right. We're looking at Kilo straight ahead. If we can go straight, we can get on Kilo and get off the runway.
United 1448, stand by, please. Don't talk. I can have other things I need to do.
Okay. I'm going to stop this, and there's still more good stuff here. He said he was on 23 right at 16. Then he said it was a 23 left in Kilo. Now he just said he's at 23 right in Kilo. The controller is not listening. 23 right and kilo never meet. That should be a clue that there's something amiss here. The controller is in the groove. They're just, I got other things to do. I'm going to deal with this problem later. This is something that controllers will typically do. When you have one problem aircraft, you move them out of the equation and you deal with everything else. And then when you have time, you go back and you deal with the problem aircraft. The problem here is you've got both the pilot and the co-pilot communicating with tower, each one of them giving different information. Now the female pilot on 1448 is actually giving better information with a better tone of voice, well, non-combative, non-aggressive, versus what the captain, I'm guessing the left seater of 1448 is saying. He's right on that second transmission, say, hey, we're on 25 left. The controller is just taking that aircraft and pushed it out of the way. This next transmission is one of the best ones I've ever heard in my career.
Yes, sir, 2998, runway 5 right, 5 runway heading clear for takeoff.
Yeah, sorry, you said 2998, so we figure out what's going on down there. We're just going to stay clear of all runways.
So they figure out what's going on. We're just going to stay clear of all runways.
Not anywhere near the runway, we get to hold short.
Okay. 62, climb, maintain 10,000. No worries. So 10, touchdown, 1662. Let's go.
Tower, user 2998 isn't going yet because I have the United who doesn't know what the hell he is. I'll take him back and I'll flash you when he's ready.
Please, please.
User 1020, are you ready to go?
We're stopped as requested on Tango.
User 1020, thank you. You're at 1448, understand you're on runway 23 right. Have you gone past taxiway Kilo and Tango 1?
And we're on 2, 3 left and 1 6. And I am facing into Kilo at this point. The nose is just over 2, 3 left.
Are you facing northwest or southeast? We are heading. We're not at 1448. Right now we are facing approximately 300 degrees on the heading. I'm looking out the window and I am seeing a sign that says 23 left to my right and a sign that says 16 to my left. And I have the other signs that say Kilo to my right and to my left. We are on a current heading 200.
First of all,
Stop all traffic control guys, please. United has no idea where they are.
please say
Thank you.
Just told radar to stop all their inbounds.
Just taxi straight ahead. Let me know when you get to the next time, please. Okay, we're going to go straight ahead. We're going to go up to Kilo here.
yeah, 205 is available if you need it.
You're at 1348. Are you just turning onto runway 23 left right now? Yes, we are, and we're going to go over. We're on 23 left. We're currently exiting, and we are coming up on Kilo now. We're at 1448. We're going to turn right at Kilo, and the slight left turn taxiway Charlie. Hold short runway 23 right.
Turn right at Kilo. Okay. Now, fortunately, this is pretty much the end of the playback. Fortunately, once this aircraft's on Kilo, they're clear of everything. But again, controllers still making assumptions that the aircraft can actually make a right turn onto Kilo. Most of us realize that sometimes there's intersections you just can't make the turn, especially with a large aircraft like that. You know, you're kind of committed to making the left turn because there's not enough pavement, lines, whatever, to make the right turn onto Kilo. Smartest pilot I've seen. I'm not going anywhere until this is sorted out. Controller, because she heard this aircraft say 23 right one time, it's stuck in her head. They're on 23 right. Remember back at the beginning, I said you have information presented to you that doesn't make any sense, so you try to force it into something that does make sense. That's expectation bias. That can't be right. This has to be right. The other thing too is US Air 1020 is saying that they're on Tango. That should be included to the controller also. If this aircraft managed to go November Tango without running into this one, then this one must be someplace else other than November Tango or 23 right and 16. Either that or this guy is a magician because he just went through another airplane. Okay. Questions or comments on this, and I'll talk to you guys a little bit about pilot deviations. Yes, sir.
Well, 1448 going down to the terminal on the other
Oh, yeah.
side of the.
They would, Mike, so everyone can hear you. Why is what?
I was curious why 1448 was going down Kilo and the terminal's on the other side of the airport.
Well, the real question is, November Tango was the initial instructions. Why'd they even turn on Bravo? And if you've got your chart on your knee, and we all know how bad the airport diagrams are, in the jets, okay? But even so, you would think that you would be able to tell that November Tango is just a straight shot. Bravo never comes into the equation. You shouldn't have to turn until you get at cross runway 16. So again, this is, crew resource management issues, again, expectation bias, and something else that's important too. And I got 5 minutes, got you done 5. And that is, if you think something's wrong, point it out. You don't have to be the senior crew member. You don't even have to know how to fly that airplane. If something doesn't feel right, something doesn't look right, say something about it. Yes, sir.
Yes, would ground radar would have helped the
Yes, but
situation?
very few airports, believe it or not, have surface radar, what we call ASDX. And they are not making ASDX anymore, nor are they installing it. They are waiting for the next technology systems to come out, which are going to use ADS-B for ADS-B surface movements. And that will become more prevalent, but of course 2020 is when ADS-B is due out. It'll probably be 2025 before we start seeing any kind of proliferation of new equipment get installed, because there's always budgeting and who gets it first and all that kind of stuff. All right, we talked about pilot deviations real quick, because obviously all of these things we saw today either resulted in a pilot deviation or could result in a pilot deviation. If you hear that phrase, possible pilot deviation, advise ready to copy a number or contact this facility, should you be nervous? Yes and no. All depends on how bad you messed up. If you flew through restricted airspace, it depends on whether or not it was really active at that time. If you cut the corner of Class Charlie or missed a taxiway, or I had one last week where the aircraft dialed the wrong radial in off the Omen bar and they were on the wrong airway. Controller caught it, but not for like 15 miles because they hadn't diverged far enough and he couldn't tell if the aircraft was just kind of wide on the airway or not. Your minor deviations from the rules, okay, and your major ones are all going to start with a letter from our friends at FAASTeam. So after I get done putting all the information together, sending it up to my QA office in Atlanta, they look at it, review it, decide if it meets the criteria for a deviation, and then they send it to flight standards. Then they will send you a form letter, and it'll have some points of contact on there. Each investigator has their own points of contact. Some put their email down, some will put the email and their phone number, some will just want you to write them back, but usually there's at least 2 forms of communication. I would recommend, if they give you a phone number, to call them. If they don't give you a phone number, then email a response back as quickly as possible. State what happened. They're interested in finding out what the causal factors were so they can enter that into the database, as well as to find out if you learned from this, because that's the real goal nowadays, is if someone makes a mistake, did they learn from it? And if they need additional training, can we provide that additional training for them to make sure they don't have that same mistake again? When you get done with this discussion with them, and again, that email will usually end up with a phone call response at some point. FAASTeam's going to fill out a form called a -18, and it's going to go in your digital file for 2 years. If you're a professional pilot and you're looking to go get another job, or none of that is going to come out if they call the FAA and say, hey, does this guy have any violations? It's between you and FAASTeam. It's there so that if 6 months from now, 3 months from now, you do it again, now they say, well, we already talked to this guy 3 months ago about airspace, and evidently he's still violating airspace. Maybe we need to go to the next level. Maybe we need to have him have an hour or two with an instructor going over aerospace and then go out for like a biennial type, evaluation, and make sure that he really understands. So you have to have a chain of errors where you don't learn before they get to actually violating you or suspending your license or anything like that. Okay? So respond to those letters, learn from the experience. What's the name of the report you guys can fill out? There's NASA forms, and then there's the ASAP. 1 minute. The ASAPs, you're allowed 1 every 5 years. I think you should be allowed them all the time. But even if you were to use your ASAP previously, please fill that out. 1, it shows FAASTeam that yes, you are interested in learning that reporting back to the system. And 2, it helps the system identify areas where pilots and controllers are making errors so that we can change our training and make sure that information gets out to everybody. I'm going to hang around for a few minutes in case anybody else has any questions because my time is up. I really appreciate y'all coming out this morning and listening to all this. Thank you again for your time. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rick. We appreciate your presentation. We look forward to seeing you again next year. Thank you. For you folks that want to hang around, our next presentation will be at 10 o'clock, and it's on Mayday in-flight emergencies and for traffic and air traffic control. That will be Dean Brown. He's an Indianapolis ATC. So come on back and come back and see their next presenter. If you need to exit out the door, please do the north exit. And I hope all of you are having a great time at Sun and Fun. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine.